So let's look at the data. So tablet users, this is not that surprising. We tend to skew a little bit older, and we tend to have a little more money than any of the other platforms, because the tablet is still somewhat a discretionary device. They were early on, the higher price points. We expect this to change, but right now, this is sort of the demographics of the population, again, out of this sample of around 8,000 people, which we think is pretty representative. But it is starting to change dramatically as lower price point tablets come onto the market and it becomes more of a mainstream device. So looking into what do we consume? So again, these surveys up front of these folks, how are they using these devices? So these devices really are media consumption devices. And we found, and we've done other research with some other folks, we did some in the UK with Decipher research that shows that the tablet is being used as an alternative media consumption device to the PC. So the PC is being used less at home as a media consumption device, and the tablet's sort of replacing that. So you see here, again, that it's about TV shows, it's about user-generated video. It's the stuff you tend to watch at work or used to watch on your PC now is being used as a tablet. So let's look, let's look now into the hypotheses, which are, one, is it really a lean-back device? Are we relaxing? Are we opening up our mind to aspirational messaging more so than we tend to on other devices? So here we see, we asked them where they tend to use it, and it is indeed an at-home device you see here. So it's primarily being used at home, sometimes on vacation. It's primarily being used, especially in media consumption mode, when connected to a Wi-Fi network, which we also have done studies where we see the same thing is true with smartphones. Smartphones are much more lean-back media devices when they're connected to Wi-Fi versus a 3G or 4G network. But then looking at when do you use it at home, well, you're using it on the couch. You're using it in bed. So again, there's not much more of a lean-back place than that in terms of where we tend to use these. And then obviously there's the one people who actually admit that they use it in the bathroom, which we jokingly say you shouldn't share your tablet. And you see some quotes out here from people. These are the video interviews. So we don't have these video interviews for you today. There's lots and lots of them. This is actually only a small part of the data from the surveys and samples. So we urge you, if this is of interest to you, to reach out to Yumi and have us come in and we can give you a much more detailed presentation on all this data. But now let's look at when you're using it or how often you're using it. So this is duration. So the tablet, again, the most recent entry into the multi-screen environment, if you will, but it's getting a similar amount of time per day as a smartphone. You also see here that TV continues to be king. TV is still the king of media consumption. We don't expect that to necessarily change, but what we do see, which you'll see in a little bit, is that we're continuing to be distracted, and we're continuing to look at multiple screens or do multiple things at a time. We're an incredibly distracted culture. But now let's look at this, which is how much time per day broken out by weekday and weekend. So there's two interesting things to look at on this graph, which is that as on weekends, we tend to have longer durations with this device. So this is showing that this device is indeed becoming an alternative in a way to a TV. It's becoming a media consumption device that we're spending increasingly amounts of time with in our off time. The other interesting bar on this chart is to look at the less than an hour on weekdays. This is particularly interesting to us in the web video or internet video space, if you will, because this is saying this is a great vehicle for short form content during the day, right? Because we're engaging with this device for short durations during our weekdays. Again, not that surprising. You grab it when you walk out of the office. You might grab it during a lunch break. And so short form content consumption during weekdays is very popular on this device. So now let's look at some of the contributing things as it relates to, am I distracted? So this is potentially a little hard to decipher, but let's look at the colors that are of interest. The interesting colors are the green. The green says, I never share this thing, right? The green is envy, selfish envy. It's my device. I don't want to share it. So you see, this really is a solo device. And the purple is always, I always share it. So we see here increasingly, or not increasingly, but predominantly, this is a personal device that you're using on your own. You might occasionally share it with a significant other or someone on a bed or a couch, but predominantly you're using the device by yourself in a lean-back environment, right? Which then drives, whoops, I keep hitting the wrong car alarm button here. This is a strange little remote. Which is, now let's get into some of the distraction things, which is other screens. So this is asking them, these are all tablets, 100% of the people here watch video on tablets. And then we ask them, what other screens do you tend to watch content on, right? So you see TV, laptops, smartphones, and even desktop computers. So we are using, along with our tablets, we tend to look at other screens as well. So it's not, again, an exclusive screen situation. And we see this over and over again. It's not about targeting the screen in terms of our media planning. It's about targeting a collection of screens, depending on what your objectives are. So let's look at the multitasking. So this is both revealing and disturbing. So first question here, the purple chart is your primary focus somewhere else? So nearly 20% of the people surveyed say that when they're watching TV, their primary focus is somewhere else. I mean, we have some other data here that shows also that that primary focus is on very long duration things, like cooking or cleaning your house. So the TV is predominantly, or not predominantly, at least 20% of the time, almost a background device. And the tablet is less so, as is the computer. Then I don't multitask at all. So look at how small that is. Although tablet is king of the I don't multitask at all, it's only 15% of us that claim we don't multitask even with a tablet. So again, there is no screen that's really capturing our attention in a sort of really dedicated way, which again reinforces this notion that when you're planning, don't think about a single screen, think about cross screens. This is a great graph. This is probably one of the more revealing things for a marketer. So one of the things that we also tested on tablet is we tested tablet in-app and we tested tablet in browser, right? Because again, we get this question from you guys all the time, which is, should I be in web experience on tablet or should I get in tablet apps? So here's our prime demo. These are young people, right? So looking at the young people, looking at the circled bars on this graph, you'll see that in-app experiences in the younger demos have the most focus. Which again, isn't that surprising if you think about young folks who are dedicated to looking at an app and playing an app or a game or whatever that app is. But this idea that I'm not multitasking when I'm in-app on a tablet, it's the #1 focus area in our survey across all other areas. And again, we have a lot more data where we can slice and dice looking at in-browser versus in-app if you're interested in learning more about that. So now let's look at the sort of payoff, if you will, the money slide, which is post-exposure control. Tablet, not surprisingly, wins. Right? So 57% unaided ad recall. This is actually in browser. We don't have on here, which we do have, which is that in-app it was around 58%, so slightly more than in browser. But again, both greater than a smartphone, TV, or any of the other screens we tested. So again, this idea that I'm at home, I'm leaning back, I'm pretty focused on it relative to other screens, it's my screen, I'm not sharing it, all these commingle to enable this to be the best ad recall device out there right now across screens. And then also looking at another final stat, which was an interesting thing, we called this the halo effect. So we asked people, there was a lot of questions, this one we bring out, which was, we asked them, do you think this brand that you saw is a modern brand based on the screen type you saw it on? Right? We saw this affinity to people who feel that brands that are advertising on mobile screens, tablets and smartphones, are perceived as being more modern. Right? Again, maybe not that surprising, but the idea being that the consumer who sees an innovative ad unit on a new screen thinks, hey, that brand that's doing that must be innovative, it must be modern. Right? So if one of your objectives is to lift the modernity, if you will, of your brand, so the mobile screens are a great way to do that in terms of consumer perceptions. So finally, in summary, looking at the 3 hypotheses we had, Again, these are lean-back devices. They're focused. We multitask less on them, but we still multitask a lot. So again, it's not like there's one screen that you need to focus on. You need to focus across screens. But in terms of the cross-screen testing we did, the tablet had the best ad recall of all of them. So finally, in conclusion, relative to all screens, tablets are awareness machines in terms of the upper funnel and upper funnel metrics that you're trying to drive. If that's what you're trying to drive, adding tablet to your media mix is really going to help drive some of those metrics in the upper funnel.